We have my friend Jake Obremski here with Swyft AI. Jake, I'll hand it over to you for a quick intro before we get started.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Nate. Appreciate it. An honor to be the very first guest here. My name is Jake Obremski, one of the co-founders and the CEO of Swyft AI. We're a revenue operations platform. So we have an AI-powered platform that automatically generates CRM data and automates go-to-market motions directly from customer calls. So end-to-end processes, pretty much anything that you can think of that happens within Salesforce and HubSpot. Capturing data for leads, opportunities, accounts, cases, custom objects, removing all that work from your go-to-market teams is the name of the game for us.
Awesome. And you come with years of sales experience and enablement experience as well. So your background is very fitting for what you're doing at Swyft right now, for sure.
It is. Yeah, it is. I mean, it's, I like to say that I was kind of on both sides of the problem that we solve. Once as a rep who, to say the least, didn't maybe take care of Salesforce as much as I needed to put the data in.
As most reps don't, right?
Right. Exactly. Right. The process adherence, kind of doing my own thing. And then I was on the enablement side where I needed processes adhered to. We needed data in the CRM, all that good stuff, team alignment, all that.
Yeah, definitely. So I'd like to kick off today with what we'll call the current trends of the state of a union for revenue teams. Specifically from a letter side, we are focused on the enablement team and the revenue enablement arm of things. So things have kind of shifted from sales enablement to revenue enablement. But even more than that, over the last 5 years, we've seen a lot of solutions come to market to support sales reps. So where I'd like to kick off today is let's talk about the state of the union for revenue teams. And then as we talk about it, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, the shocking statistic of the amount of time that sales reps spend selling. So I'm curious how we got to where we're at today. And then what's kind of the current state of the market? I just want to get your thoughts there.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll try to answer it without saying AI too much, because I mean that's an enormous part of it, right? But something that we're seeing aside from that, at least when we're speaking to our customers and prospects, a lot of these teams, or the main theme, I guess, that we're seeing is staying agile, which makes a lot of sense, right? Because if you look at the last, let's call it 4 years, right, since 2020, we've seen the pandemic. That moved everything or a lot of things from being in person, a lot of in-person selling to a lot of, the digital transformation, right? Being
exactly.
Things like that. 2021 kind of went gangbusters, at least for software. It was absolutely killer, right? So you could probably send 1,000, generic emails and probably get a few responses and close a deal. And then of course, late 2022 rolls along and we have AI now. And that's really, of course, you flipped everything kind of on its head. So staying agile and being able to shift to changing competitive landscapes, to different selling markets, right? It's obviously very different now than it was in 2021. So we're seeing that theme pretty much across the board in revenue enablement, is staying very agile. How do we utilize AI to solve that exact problem that you just mentioned, which is why we started Swyft. That statistic is nuts. But those are really the two biggest themes that we're seeing with almost everyone that we talk to.
Yeah, that makes sense. As far as the current problems that we're facing across the revenue organization, the problems seem to be many, which is interesting. As I talk to customers, and I'm sure you do as well, everyone faces their own unique flavor of problems and whatever their pain points are. Can you boil down what that means in today's market? And then also like how we're handling those. And we can come back and say, well, that's AI is going to solve that. But what I'm trying to take this is, yes, AI can solve some things, right? But what are the practical use cases to the broad array of problems that we're seeing in the market?
It's a good question. I mean, boiling it down, I'll kind of pick one that comes up a lot with a lot of our current customers that are building really amazing stuff on Swyft and our prospects too. The handoff process, whether that's between your BDR role, outbound role to account executive to customer success. right? That takes up
Mhm.
quite a bit of time for a lot of those teams, which kind of leads to another problem of just misalignment between revenue teams. You mentioned something earlier that I thought makes like it is the theme now, going from sales enablement to more revenue enablement, right? And how do we make sure that everyone is kind of working as one machine?
Mhm.
And that's something that comes up all the time, right? Is the handoff process. It's a huge use case for most of our customers. Is how do we make that as smooth as possible? How do we make sure that, you know, throughout the sales process, we're getting everything that customer success is going to need to properly take care of and manage the account.
Right.
I mean, that's a really, really common example that we hear from customers.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah. Okay, so kind of moving into what we'll call like the productivity side of things. Lots of different tools right now, and there kind of always has been, I would say, to a certain degree over the last
Oh yeah,
decade specifically, right?
yeah.
Technology obviously brings on new technologies and new solutions.
Yep.
Where do you see, and I kind of want to focus this one on the enablement side, and enablement can be used broadly too, not just like the specific tools for enablement. Seeing as that Letter is in the enablement space, I'm curious where you see the enablement functions maturing over time. We've talked about, you know, the cross-functional changes and the ops side of things on the enablement piece, and like the communication. Like that's kind of the what spurred go to market. So. From the enablement side, as a sales rep and in your career, where do you see that changing specifically on for enablement? Like coming from a sales rep perspective,
Yeah.
what are some of the biggest pain points that like we can see being fixed in today's market?
So you mentioned something interesting, and that was so many tools over the last decade have, you know, become very prevalent in the market,
Right.
being used, which is great. But it's almost caused a separate problem, which is data silos, a
Hmm.
whole ton of admin work to be done, jumping from Salesforce to Salesloft to Google Calendar to Gmail, right? And jumping
Exactly.
between everything and forget about, you know, the contracting tools, DocuSign, things like that. And so I think what's going to change, and what we're already seeing change, I think over the next year, is obviously consolidation and narrowing that down. But I would also encourage folks to look at solutions that I like to think of as enterprise glue. Y Combinator talks about this quite a bit, right? And there's always going to be tools that are best in class, enablement tools that are best in class for kind of different pieces of the
Hmm.
role, right? And, you know, let's think about how do we connect those tools in better ways. I think that's something that these tools themselves haven't done all that well. Maybe rightfully so. All these
Yeah.
tools want you to stay in their platform as much as possible, and that's kind of their goal. But at
Right.
least what we're trying to do at Swyft is become that enterprise glue. And I think specifically in enablement, that's a trend that we're starting to see, and something that should become more prevalent over the next few years.
That makes sense. And if you could go back to yourself in the sales and the
Yeah.
enablement space, what would be like the two or three things that you wish you had as a sales rep that now could be, you know, whether they were available then or not, if
Yeah.
you could kind of switch the script a little bit and say, now if I was a sales rep now, I wish I had these types of tools. Obviously Letter, obviously Swyft, but
Right.
more high level than that. What does that look like, you know,
I
as a
think
sales rep today?
Yeah, so just really high level, like anything that's in my flow of work, right? I think there's a couple of companies out there that are doing this really, really well. Is just catch me where I am, right?
Yeah.
Swyft does it. There's a few other tools out on the market, more enablement specific tools that, you know, will live directly in the Salesforces of the world. They'll live in your CRM. They'll live in your other tools.
Right.
I think like from the sales reps perspective, that's going to be really important is find me where I am. Don't make me go to something new.
Right.
I think that's in enablement specifically going to be an enormous shift. I think if you're not doing that, you're probably getting left behind a little bit.
Right.
You know, there's of course always going to be, you know, your use cases and you know, Gong, for example, right, is a good example of something
Right.
where you're probably going to want to go into that tool. But I think the trend is starting to shift to be in the flow of work, you know, being that high level main value prop is find
Yeah.
the reps where they are.
Mm-hmm. And that goes back to the initial point of like 30 to 35% of a rep's time is done selling. right? So the other 70% of time is scouring up to 15 different applications, is a statistic I read last week.
That's crazy.
It's just insane. Okay, so let's kind of swift gears. Let's kind of shift gears. I want to talk about AI a little bit. And I think where I want to take this conversation is how do we provide value as a part of this conversation, or more generically, to the sales and revenue community of like what exactly is AI? It doesn't need to be technical, right? But what I would like to understand, or at least convey to our audience, is this is what you should think about AI. Like, you don't need to be a computer scientist or an engineer, but this is how you should think about using it, how you should think about incorporating it into your daily life, and so on.
What I tell our customers is, without getting too technical, is try to think about it in the terms of a second brain. Like, I know that sounds kind of funny, right? And I even tell a lot of our customers, like, you can talk to Swyft like you would talk to a person. I think people are starting to get a little more okay with that, but it still sounds funny, right? And Letter is a good example. I think utilizing artificial intelligence in the sense of like running a mock cold call, right? That is an amazing use case for this technology, along with process automation and any of that admin work that's taking your ICs away from selling. You have to be thinking about that.
Exactly.
Everyone, you have to be going down that road. You have to be looking at whether it is your sales team, whether it's your customer success team, or just your entire revenue org, and say, how much time are they selling? Right? 35% is kind of the general like statistic that's out there. And how do we get that as close to 100% as possible? It's not going to be 100%, right? We got to jump into meetings. We got to, have our one-on-ones and things like that. But how do we get it as close to there as possible? And not just even for going back to Letter, not even just for your actual ICs, but when you run a mock cold call, say you're a BDR manager, that's time out of your day as well. Right, that that manager is spending away from the rest of the team running those mock cold calls, which is great. But if we could utilize something like artificial intelligence to replicate that, that is not only is that saving time, but we're training our reps in a more efficient way. It's such a remarkable technology that can be utilized in just limitless ways. I mean, I think that's just it's what Letter does and what Swyft does. So
exactly,
yeah,
I totally agree there. And I think what's interesting is you've got ChatGPT and kind of the foundational models on one end, and then you have, which is great. Like this week, we introduced a new foundational model, new flagship model for OpenAI. Google had a 4-hour presentation yesterday for their updates. There's a lot going on, so it's very easy to be confused about what's going on in the market, or at least kind of like overwhelmed, to be at the very least. But I think you hit the nail on the head of like, just understand that like, even if it's as simple as saying it's another brain to do something, you should at least pay attention to it to understand like how you can leverage it to be more efficient in your job. Because I think that's the biggest word that it comes to mind for me is efficiency. Is like, if you can imagine getting some information immediately, right? Or making sure that it's available and consistent across an application immediately, or your workflows are totally automated. Or, from a Letter standpoint, we create trainings in minutes using the collateral that you've provided. And similar for you guys, as you create workflows automatically, like it's literally instantaneous and with high quality, right? And I think that's the other piece, that the last piece, the quality piece, is where maybe we'll touch on that for a second, of handling the risk around quality. How do you guys handle that at Swyft, and maybe even and more broadly too on the sales side? How do we have those discussions with sales leaders about the quality? Because as I think about quality, and if I've demoed other products and like have been around, deep modeling for 10 years, the quality is a big deal, right? I can't be giving wrong information. So how do you guys handle that, and what are your kind of overall thoughts there?
Yeah, it's a really great question. It's one that gets brought up in every, implementation that we do with all of
Right.
our customers, right? And so at least specific to Swift, I can't speak to how anyone else is really doing this, but we do what we call prompt audits. So when we, not to get too technical into the product, but when we implement, right, you just mentioned there's a lot of workflows that happen behind the scenes automatically. We generate data that's going to make its way into Salesforce. So to your
Right.
point, quality has to be pretty solid,
Yeah.
right? Right. If
Yeah.
it's gonna make its way into Salesforce. And so what we'll do for each customer on a weekly basis is go through the results, the outputs that Swift gave, look at what was accepted most commonly, what was rejected most commonly by the rep, and then audit what was
Hmm.
most commonly rejected, and go back to our customers and say, hey, it seems like Swift isn't outputting what you need for this specific field or for this specific process that you're looking to automate. Let's go back. We have internal testing that we do quite a bit for each and every implementation. But we see about 93% accuracy after the first 30 days, and it only
Right.
goes up from there.
Yeah.
So as these models get better, I think that's a big part of it too. You just mentioned OpenAI released GPT 4.0 2 days ago.
Mhm.
Each and every model is going to get better. They're going to constantly be updated. They probably won't even have a training set anymore. They're just going to constantly be learning. So I
Mhm.
think the quality issue is going to become lesser. I think it's the worst it's going to be right now.
Right.
And it's
Yeah,
only
it's only
going
going
to
to get
get
better.
and it's only going to get better, exactly. But
Mhm.
in the interim, we do things like, audits and things like that to make sure that we're giving off the correct output.
Yeah, sounds good. As far as implementing, we'll say AI broadly
Yeah.
into the sales and revenue teams.
Mhm.
We've talked already about getting people educated and getting as a revenue leader learning more, or as a sales rep understanding how to use even something as basic as ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Let's take it maybe a step further and think about you know what the challenges are on implementing some of these tools and some of these products. So if you were speaking to a CRO today
Yeah.
and they have baseline knowledge, they want to implement AI, but they're just not really sure like what effective implementation looks like. How would we have that discussion with them about, thinking about the future and implementing AI right now to understand like its impact? Whether it's a monetary discussion, a risk discussion, which we've kind of already covered, but maybe just a general discussion on like what are the challenges that AI brings, but also like how do we have that discussion with them?
I think the challenges it brings is the unknown. And what I mean by that is, we know internally at Swift and internally at Letter, the success metrics around our products, right? And
Right.
the outputs and all that. It's just getting over the initial hump of, is this even going to work? It's such a new technology, especially when we look at it being implemented in a business. We're paying quite a bit of money for it. So doing any sort of proof of concept is at least how we've been able to get past that. But thinking about it in the sense of, not just efficiency gains, but actual improvements in selling. I did a demo, I think last week, with a prospect of mine, and the CRO asked me, after the demo, he said, hey, I see the efficiency gains here. I
Right.
see, the time savings, process adherence. It's all amazing. But how does this make us sell better? And that's such a great question. It's such a great way to think about the implementation of AI, and not just saying, all right, AI is going to help us get more time back in our day. That's awesome. But how is it also going to help us sell better? I think that's where Letter can come in.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you think about the value between both of those things, how do we sell better, and how do we have more time? It's hard to not see the ROI on that,
Yeah.
so long as it actually works, right? And that's kind of where what everyone's big question is right now. And that's where I would recommend to other companies, start to offer more POCs around any AI driven product. Make sure that you're doing everything you can internally to make sure that models won't hallucinate. You have kind of your guardrails in place, so to speak. I think that problem is starting to go away as these models get better, but it's not gone yet. And so we need to, as the companies, providing the service, need to put more guardrails in place or have some guardrails in place.
Yeah, I was really hoping that my question would lead you to that answer, because and here's the reason why is, as I think about go to market for Letter, and when we talk about how AI is impacting enablement, and when we talk to heads of sales or CROs or heads of enablement, we have a dual talk track. One of them is efficiency, and then one of them is growth as well. And it's very hard to conceptually understand that problem, because over the last 2 years, since basically COVID, there's been this kind of conundrum of growth versus efficiency. And so many CROs are talking about efficient growth. And it's almost like such a paradox, right? Of that doesn't even make any sense. I'm going to cut headcount, but grow at the same time.
Right.
And you don't believe it's true until you realize, okay, I'm actually getting, 3 hours a day back for my sales managers, but they have such high quality output that they're actually selling better at the same time. So I'm curious to see if you have a follow-up on that, because that's exactly where I wanted to take this discussion. Was it is possible, and this is the reason why.
It is, and it's possible because of AI. I will die on that hill that this is quite possibly the most important technology that a lot of us will ever see in our lifetimes. When I got asked that question last week by that CRO, we brought up the example of, we can automate, pretty much any internal go-to-market motion on Swyft. But when it comes to helping reps sell better, we have customers that are building out enablement automations that, if they use Medic, for example, they build out an automation on Swyft that says, hey, if the rep forgets to ask about any part of Medic, let them know. And so if they don't ask who the economic buyer is, just kind of as a simple example, Swyft will say, hey, Jake, in your last conversation with Acme, you didn't ask who the economic buyer is. Let's make sure we do that on the next, on the next call, right? So anything like that, that's helping reps sell better. It's helping them also be more efficient. And that is such a win-win for everyone when you think about implementing AI. It's such an important part of everyone's strategy right now. I would absolutely encourage anyone who doesn't have an AI strategy to get on it. It is that important.
Yeah, exactly. As a follow-up to that, how do you think about, if at all, I'm not sure if there's incumbents that Swyft is kind of considered competitors with, but let's say that there are incumbents that we're choosing Swyft, or we have existing products that do something similar, or it's net new. This is kind of a nuance for a lot of startups right now. Is there are some incumbents, but we have the benefit as AI startups of being what I like to say is AI native. So that's such a massive benefit, because we're not putting AI on top of a pile of monolithic data sets, or super fragile databases. We are building things in a very robust manner with AI, and that's a huge advantage for us. So how do you think about that when you have that discussion with prospects and customers of this is why our infrastructure, our strategy, or our product is even though it's new, a year old or whatever it is, is infinitely better than incumbents because of X, Y, and Z. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really big competitive advantage being what we say is built from the ground up with AI, compared to, we do have kind of those incumbent competitors that sort of attack the same problem, but they kind of just throw out an AI feature, an AI product on top of their main offering. I think for us, we don't want to recreate the problem of fragmented tools that don't work well together. And in some instances that we've seen, without naming names, right, is you have your core offering and then you offer an AI product, and they're really different. They don't work well together. You kind of have to pick one or the other. We do not want to go down that route. If you're a startup that has anything to do with data, all these, let's use these CRMs as an example, right? We'll use Salesforce as an example. They are offering a lot of AI powered tools.
Mhm.
Those tools are functionally great, but if your CRM data is bad, the tools are kind of pointless, right? If you don't
Yeah.
have the right data in Salesforce and you say, hey, Einstein, run this report for me, well, the report's still going to be wrong,
Right.
right? And so I just use that as an easy example, but I think that's applicable to a lot of other companies that are out there is, are you using AI for, anything like that, where it's going to be more reliant on the data you have and it's really more the data that's wrong?
Yeah.
I think it's really important to build from the ground up. I think moving forward for anyone who's starting to try something like this.
Exactly. That's kind of the answer I was hoping for. Is when I talk about it, I like to say we are AI native, built
Yep.
with AI from the ground up. That is way different than saying we're putting AI on top of old infrastructure. It's incredibly different, and I think
Way different.
there's going to be a shift in the market. It's not there yet, because people are going to see the quality of output that we see right now in the startup land. That it's like so incredibly high. Whether that's a co-pilot that's embedded in your data, or that's kind of like on your side too, like the automations and using things in embedded with the infrastructure rather than put on top of the infrastructure. To your point, using Salesforce, that principle is the same. Like the CRM data is poor, so the output is going to be poor. I don't like using the phrase of like garbage in, garbage out, because I think it's just overused. But it does apply in this case where it's like you either build with AI or you put AI on top. If you put AI on top, you are solely held to the quality of the inputs that are fed into that AI that you cannot fix decades worth of errors or issues.
Right. And I think you're spot on. And we talk about that a lot. There's a lot that we built into Swyft that is powered by AI that our customers don't even realize is powered by AI, right? Like generating data or automatically dispositioning an event, kind of those kind of processes. It's pretty clear that that's AI powered, but there's a lot else that is kind of, I don't want to say behind the scenes, but it's not so clear that it's powered by AI, but it brings the quality of the product up so tremendously. It's so much different. It's so much different being.
So how do you bring that to your clients? That's a question I continuously battle with is bringing that to prospects and clients of like, this is why AI is important. Like highlighting those things that they may not see at face value. How do you have those discussions? Or do you even have those discussions?
We have them. I don't know if it's necessarily, at least now, I would say maybe back in October, the question was around, is it really that important? I think people are very quickly starting to realize how important this is going to be and what a drastic difference it can make. I don't know if we necessarily get into the granularities of the product like that. I think, which is a good thing, to be honest with you, when our customers don't even have to ask, because that means your product's working like magic.
Exactly.
And that's what's important, when building with AI, especially. So I think people are starting to see the importance. I think that's ramping up rather quickly. It was much, much different a year ago when we were very much in beta. It was so much different, but now I think people are starting to see the importance of it.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. So as far as closing things out, let's talk about the future of revenue teams. Enablement would be nice to cover, but let's talk about the future of sales, future of enablement, and what that means, leveraging AI. I'll kind of start the discussion to a certain degree of, AI right now is obviously a totally new paradigm of use cases. And everyone likes to say, yeah, it's been around for 50 years. We know that, but it's never been available at this level of scale and with this level of quality. And we know that because at the enterprise level, it's interesting that the enterprise level is the one that's adopting this first, and arguably having the largest impact. And they're going to startups for solutions, which I find incredibly interesting. That large scale, multi-billion-dollar corporations are tapping into the startup world for these types of things. I think it's awesome to see.
SaaS dollars are back up for grabs, as they say. Yeah,
exactly. It's such a good point. So as we look ahead to the next, 2 years, we'll say, without predicting where foundational models go and things like that, how does the sales landscape and the revenue landscape look? The entire ecosystem, from rev ops to sales ops to enablement, and just rev and go to market teams. What does that look like in the next 2 to 5 years? Let's just say 2 years, because 5 years because it was a way different time horizon. What do you think it looks like?
I mean, even in 2 years, it could be so much. I mean, think about 2 years ago today, ChatGPT was not, no one knew about it, right? No one was having these conversations. So in 2 years, I mean, let's not go back to this because I'll probably be wildly off. But I think so. Speaking specifically to kind of those independent contributors, right? I think the time that we're going to see spent sourcing deals, selling deals, and managing deals, managing customers is going to go up dramatically. I think people are going to start to see that a lot of this admin work that takes 65, 70% of a rep's time can rather easily be automated now. When it comes to enablement, I think we are going to see more in the flow of work, which is great, and more ongoing. And more automatic enablement. And so what I mean by that is kind of that example that I gave earlier of setting up processes to where if you're a CSM and you're running your QBR with a customer and they mention a pain point that another product you offer could solve, and you do not attempt that upsell using some product, whether it's Swyft, whether it's something else, to say, hey, Jake, customer ABC mentioned this pain point. We have this product that you really need to bring up in that next call. So more ongoing, always on enablement is really where I see that going. And then revenue operations, sales operations, same type of theme as I mentioned in my first point, right? Instead of having to work through some new sales process or go-to-market motion, and then working with enablement to get the teams up to speed and having to go through all those countless meetings. I think a lot of those things are going to be done in the background without the end reps even knowing.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the thing I would add to that is the personalization factor.
Absolutely.
I think, we come at it from a generative AI perspective on like sales content and collateral, where you're training, you're coaching, you're onboarding, the entire experience is personalized to who you are as a rep. And that transcends all aspects of sales, I feel like, too. And I think
onboarding is going to take such a huge shift. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, it is. You just have so much. Like right now, the number that I saw is it takes a great sales rep like 11 months to be, productive from one study, right? Or 90 days to onboard and start selling. Like there is a world in the next 12 months where the onboarding process takes 1 week. And you are selling in the second week, and you are bringing in revenue in the first month. Which,
100%.
as far as I know, that's pretty much unheard of.
Yeah, and think about how that's going to affect turnover too.
Oh,
I mean, think about. I mean, there's some stat out there. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but a poor onboarding experience, reduces, a rep's, tenure with the company by months or something like that. There's something out there, but think about how that'll affect that too. If you're a rep and you get onboarded in a week, you have all the tools necessary to start closing deals, to start making money, to start seeing success.
Yeah.
Oh man, I mean,
and let's say 12 months later, and 12 months later, you're on a PIP. Like in this paradigm, a year, 2 years from now, what the PIP is going to be personalized. So like, hey, here's your last 12 months or last quarter's worth of sales performance. Here's the things that you failed on. Here's these trainings. Here's these types of things for you to be successful. I think we have a whole new success range across the revenue orgs of what that looks like, which I find incredibly interesting over the next 2 years.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a huge shift. I think transparently, a lot of companies get the performance improvement process wildly wrong because to your point, rep one who's struggling and rep two who's struggling could very, very well be struggling with two very different parts of the sales process, two very different things. And so personalizing that is going to be so much more important. It's gonna encourage so much more success, which I'm really excited to see.
Definitely. Well, listen, Jake, it's been a pleasure. We'll wrap it up here, but I want to say thanks for your time. And until next time, thank you for being our first guest on the Enablement Redefined podcast.
It's an honor. It's a pleasure. Thanks, Nate. I appreciate it.